Morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a second. We'll just let Zoom fold in people. There's people waiting in the waiting room, so we'll just be a minute to get started. Morning, everyone. We're just going to give Zoom a couple more seconds to fold people in. We've got people still entering from the waiting area, so just give us 1 second to get started. Okay, why don't we get started? I'm sure more people will join as time passes. I'm Mark Crowther, Chair of the Department of Medicine. Welcome to the second of the Chair's Grand Rounds of 2022 fall session. Today, I'm very pleased to introduce, I think everybody will know, Dr. Teresa Chan. Teresa has assumed an extraordinarily important role in the faculty administration. She's responsible for essentially all of our continuous learning initiatives that are run through McMaster once we've graduated from our training programs. Teresa is a bundle of energy. I don't know if you know this, but my joke about Teresa is every Friday night we plug her into the Ontario grid and she powers the province for the weekend, and then they unplug her and turn the nuclear power plants back on. She's not only an expert in communication, but also is a real scholar and was, I think, most notably recently awarded the University Scholar position, which is held for only the most promising early career investigators at McMaster. So without further ado, I will introduce and turn it over to Dr. Chan.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Chan, as Mark had just pointed out, and I'm going to be talking about continuing professional development in a digital world. And I think that this is especially salient on the other side of the pandemic. I think many of us have been doing great work and trying to stay on top of the pandemic. And I think that in today's world, I think the digitization of CPD and faculty development and all those things is something that we have to grapple with, and actually for many of us there's been found opportunity. So I think this is great. You can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. I haven't done TikTok and Instagram yet, though we just got a paper accepted about TikTok, so I might have to start leaning in there as well. And I have some disclosures. Some of the work that I'll talk about has been partially funded by things like PSI Foundation, and I do have a history of helping kickstart a faculty incubator program in the US that's internationally run digitally. So I'll be mentioning about them. So I'll disclose that I used to be paid by them, no longer. And of course, I'm paid by McMaster University for my work in the Faculty of Health Sciences as the Associate Dean of Continuing Professional Development, and I'll be talking to you more about that. All right, so the objectives for today are that I want to make sure that everyone's aware of innovations that are going on in continuing professional development, and to have all of you think about what your next journey for learning is going to be. And so I will be stopping and pausing, and you can use the chat, I think, in order to add some of your thoughts in a little bit. So maybe dust off your keyboard and try to find the chat. If you're in going mobile, then it'll be in a different tab. So just go ahead and think about where you're going to go, and then I will have some cues for you to actually, I'll stop and pause and ask you to comment. All right. So what is a futurist? So that's something that when I was trying to think about, well, what is the future for things like continuing professional development or even medical education or health professions education, that is something that I immediately kind of started asking around about, and people started using this word. You know, there are people who are actually professional futurists. So there's an organization called the Organization for Professional Futurists, and you can look them up, but they have a Wikipedia page where they talk about a conceptual framework that really aligns with, I think, what I'd like to talk about today. So I'm going to borrow it from them. And as you can see, sometimes you'll see these little QR codes. Many of you will know by now how to use them, but you can take up your second device if you have your phone, and you can go ahead and scan that, and that will allow you to see the Wikipedia link that I'm referring to. In that link, they talk about how there's many steps to being a futurist, but the first is to frame exactly what you're going to be looking to future forecast, I guess. And the idea would be that you need to define and scope out that exact domain that you're trying to examine. Then you're going to scan around and you're going to explore signals and indicators that exist within the world as you see it. Sometimes it's not in your field, sometimes it's in an adjacent field, sometimes it's in just your daily life, but you're scanning for those things. Then you're actually going to start futuring. So that means you're going to do brainstorming, you're going to identify the baseline, you're going to think about alternatives, you're going to really dive deep into thinking about what the future could hold. And then this is where, as a leader, you might start actually honing some of that, right? So you're going to develop your preferred future. Out of all the alternatives, what are you going to put together, right? And then designing is when you actually take that vision and start prototyping, start implementing some parts of it. And then you're going to have to adapt it because, you know, everyone knows you put a plan together and it's great on paper, but it's not great on reality. So I think that you do have to strategize around bringing in alternatives, bringing new ways of doing, improving things. And I think the QI people are very good at this, and very excited that I just mentioned the word improvement. So I'll go back to that later. I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about the scanning now, because I think I've defined the domain we're going to explore today as like digital influences on CPD, and let's explore some of those signals and indicators. So I'm going to talk about 5 trends in continuing professional development that I think most of us should know. And the first trend is that the digital transformation of med-ed and continuing professional development and HPE, it can't be ignored anymore. How many of you have some fraction of your practice right now as virtual care? How many of you have given your last lecture like this one on Zoom? Right. I think that digital transformation was prompted by the pandemic. We've got all those changes in the way that we care for patients online, but we also have flipped over into being much more comfortable with digital learning, digital teaming, and I think even some people have become more more akin to digital, you know, being an auntie or a grandparent on Zoom or Teams at this point. Because I think that, you know, to stay connected during all this hard time, we've had to find new ways of doing. And I think that has allowed us to then have all these affordances in this new world. It's a silver lining, considering all that we've gone through. And I think that, you know, we have, you know, virtual patient care now, and many people are using these technologies to connect with patients. And I think that, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, and even probably now, many of us don't feel ready to actually engage in that kind of teaching. Some of us are just learning how to best efficiently do it, adding in the layer and complexity of having learners in those zones, I think has been a challenge. And I think that, you know, during the pandemic, one of the things that we rose up to do was actually, and this is almost, you know, well, it's a couple of years ago now, but we did a summer series of webinars that allowed people to actually develop some of those skills based on some of those people that had already been doing some version of virtual care. We found some of the expertise, and we did webinars. But just like these rounds are being recorded, we did record these webinars and then put them up as enduring artifacts that people could come back to. If you haven't seen these before, I would definitely think that if you have learners in your virtual care setting, if you've been doing any of that work, you should definitely check these out and see some of the checklists and tools that were talked about in some of these sessions. I know that there are people that have gone back to them and found them quite useful now that you're more immersed in that virtual patient care teaching and learning. So I definitely think that some of these resources that we kind of emergently put together during the pandemic have become more useful now in the reflection post. The family medicine department has also put together a really good module on something similar. This dives deep into more of the science and the nitty-gritty about some of the work that they've done in systematic reviews and things like that. So if you're looking for the evidence behind it, I think there's some really great stuff that they put in this. And obviously, I think that paying attention to some of the great work that's coming out of the Merit Unit with their research around and reporting around some of the great pandemic innovations that have happened have been really important. I think that, you know, with all the digital learning, sometimes there's multiple things going on at once, right? How many times have you walked into maybe your kids doing online school and this is what was going on? They had their phone, they have their Apple TV, Alexa's in the background there, and then you have an iPad where the YouTube video is streaming. right? And I do think that in this busy world, creating those opportunities for people to engage in that digital learning are important. And I think that we've been trying to support you as faculty members through the faculty development side of the CPD, but also providing you all with great learning experiences through digital CPT so that you can experience some of that great work. So I think that the departments under Dr. Panju, he's led a wonderful series from through continuing health sciences education, which is one of our units within CPD. They've been doing a very wonderful webinar series where they bring some of the best teachers from our department and actually speak to everyone. And I think that they've used really great kind of state-of-the-art techniques to make sure we're engaging people, keeping the talks short. I think that we've seen so many people actually tune into those, and it's been really great to see some good exemplars coming out of our own department. But I do think that, you know, we need to be supporting the faculty some more in terms of thinking about how we engage in digital learning and trying to figure out, I think at this point, what should go back to in person, right? And what should be something that we can keep digital. I think that having chairs rounds, because of our large geographic footprint, I think Mark's been right on the ball, you know, like about thinking about how we can keep this digital so that we can be inclusive and all the sites are, everyone's coming in to the same sites. But I do think that there are judicious reasons why we might want to bring people back together in person, as long as the public health guidelines stay okay. And so I think that one of the ways that we've been trying to support the faculty members during the pandemic is a little website we put together during the pandemic called macpfd.ca. And this was a way for us to get content out quickly to those teachers like yourselves who had to suddenly put together lots of new ways of teaching and learning in that online space. However, it's expanded since then. And so I think we've done a almost full complete digital transformation of faculty development here. Whereas before people would have to drive in to MDCL and attend a workshop, most of the things now are actually online. And so if you want to get involved in faculty development, you can actually go to the event calendar tab, and I'll show you that in a couple of minutes. But some of you, and I know I've gotten some fan texts when I text some of the cardiologists, like, I love the last podcast. You can, there's a podcast you can subscribe to. It's on Apple. It's on Apple. It's on I think Cloudbean, SoundCloud. There's a bunch of different podcast apps that I've picked up. So we've had over 10,000 listens, and so definitely check out our podcast. It's meant to inspire you to do more academic work, to see the world differently, to bring in all the different pillars of faculty development, which is to help you up your game with teaching and learning, or leadership and management, or scholarly practice, or creativity and humanism. So definitely check out the podcast. There's also a large video archive. As I pointed out some of the videos earlier, you can go back and see what we've gotten during the pandemic, because we try to cash in on what we could during the time of the pandemic and attract great speakers from all over the world. We've got speakers from Stanford, Harvard, we've got speakers from Australia. You know, there's a lot of affordances that we've been able to cash in on during the pandemic to bring people in that might not have always wanted to come to Hamilton, Ontario. And I think that that's been really great. And I think that you'll find that we have a newsletter if you want things delivered to your inbox just as a burst of information. And we have the MacPFD blast as well. So I'll take you through some of these things. There's the event calendar where you can go through, and there's live events, there's synchronous events, and there's sometimes going to be in-person events listed here as well. You can put yourself in there, and these are some samples of the ones that we've done in the past. We partner with the library sometimes to make sure their stuff is in there. We also partner with Main Campus to promote some of their stuff in this website. So we're trying to make sure that you have a direct link to all sorts of really cool activities and workshops that will help you up your game as a faculty member. The video archive has actually, it's probably more close to 50, 60 digital events now. And we definitely have some direct to video archive offerings as well. And so there's lots of great work that's being put out there. And hopefully you can join in the mix and see what's been there. And then I think that you can take a look at the YouTube channel generally and subscribe if you want to, but most of the stuff will pop up on the website or combined in other things. So you don't have to feel like you have to subscribe to YouTube if that's not something you usually do. We also have the podcast, which is, I think, a great way to fill your morning commute or your evening commute. And we try to have different topics. And so most recently, I think I just finished the last episode, and it's about inclusivity in our teaching and the language that we use. And we had a great nurse educator really kind of highlight some of the ways that she brings that inclusivity into her practice as a teacher. And I think that hearing from the diversity of the experts we have across FHS and not just our own little bubble, I think that's been really great to unify people around that. We obviously also have various superstars. You know, Mark Crowther has been on our podcast, and we've had lots of people want to be on the podcast. Some people shy away from it, but if you want to be involved, please let us know. We are happy to engage in an interview with you and try to slot you in as well. And we'd love for you to share a little piece of what you do with the world. Recently, we even interviewed some of our emeritus professors, and so it's been pretty cool to talk to two secret guests that I won't say, who are married to each other and recently retired. I just recorded that podcast yesterday, so stay tuned, because I think that there'll be really great opportunities for us to all learn about different parts of the academic life. And I think that in order to do all this during the pandemic, we actually had to form new ways of doing digital teaming. And so we actually connected people through Slack. I mean, you could do the same thing with Teams, but at the time we hadn't invested in Teams yet. So we chose Slack, which is an app that allows you to, facilitate work between meetings, to stay connected. And so this is an example of a screenshot of when we were trying to pick the name for the podcast, right? The podcast I just showed you is called Mac PFT Spark. And, we lined them all up. We had people vote with emojis as to which was the title they wanted most. And that helps us stay in touch. And lots of people were kind of like aligned with that. And we had lots of exchanges between people. So we had 81 people kind of back and forth bantering about some of this stuff. And it was great to connect that digital community practice that underpinned what we were trying to accomplish together, which is help everyone else upskill themselves. I think the other thing that's nice is that just like on Teams, you can see with the little green dot if someone's online. And so those water cooler conversations that, unless you're actually at a water cooler with someone, you might not be able to do, we were able to have them as spontaneous chats online. And spontaneity is sometimes the root of creativity. So I think having that was allowing us to be inventive, be creative. And I think that we can do information sharing and having greater celebrations of success through such things like a digital corridor. All right, the trend number 2 that I've been seeing is the idea of growth orientation. I think we talked about growth mindset a lot. If you have kids in grade school, they've probably told you you're not growth mindseted enough because it's such a big phenomena. But growth orientation is something that I think needs to not just be folded into our own lives, but actually into aspects of our organization. And so organizational growth mindset to me is that we need to not just preach it to our learners, that we have to continuously and constantly grow and learn, but I think we have to do it too. We as faculty members, as an organization, have to think about what we're going to learn about ourselves and then how we're going to improve it. Everyone's seen, the fixed mindset, growth mindset, kind of divergence that that Carol Dweck has talked about. But I do think that it's worthwhile reminding us that, fixed mindset is like seeing yourself as being a static formed item, kind of like think of it as a statue carved out of clay, maybe perfect, but fixed. And I think the growth mindset is to see yourself as someone who can grow, that regardless of what age you are, what state of life you are in, how far you are along, how senior you are in the hierarchy, that there's always something more to learn. And I think that we're really lucky around here because many of my role models have been people that are here in the audience right now that have demonstrated that throughout their career, they've been growth mindset. They're always learning something new, always carving a new part of their practice, always actually talking about what they're going to do next. And I think that hunger, that thirst, that curiosity, the itch that we all have, that's what I'm talking about, and trying to find that, and but living it, right? And I think that if you haven't read this book, it's actually good to read the original textbook from the scientific work. This is her knowledge translation book. Obviously, it's not the scientific work that she published in journals, but I think it's a tour de force when it comes to thinking about this. And I think that it's a core tenet of our culture that we want to breed in CBME. But something is that we have to shift it also into something that we live and role model, right? For those of you who haven't encountered this lady, her name is Joan Sargent. She's a PhD, a nursing colleague actually at Dalhousie, but she is a very celebrated um, uh, medical education researcher. And so she talks about something called the R2C2 model, not to be confused with a droid in Star Wars, obviously, but the R2C2 model really was a way to codify that conversation as a coach with another person, whether it's a trainee or a colleague, and actually hardline building that growth mindset together with someone else. And so I do think that coaching, as many other people have talked about, is a way forward for us to have as a modality within what we do. And I think that having a framework like this, which is, build that relationship, explore those reactions, determine the content, and then coach for change. It's a quick mnemonic that if you want to read more about it, I think it complements the growth mindset quite a bit, because the idea is that when you are thinking about how you can change, having someone by your side to coach you through it is important. The number of times I probably would have ditched the gym had I not had a personal trainer waiting for me is infinite. And so I think that it's important for us to think about how we can bring that into our lives and how we can do that for ourselves, right, as faculty members. So some people I have to say, some people are told they have to get peer observations of teaching, for instance, for promotion. But I think that if you can develop that relationship with someone, how great would it be to actually get meaningful, constructive feedback to be a better teacher by actually having someone observe you, either in the clinical space or watching something like this online. The nice thing about Zoom now is that you can record the talk and then they can watch it and at another time and give you feedback that way. So I do think that having that growth mindset first, and then having someone that's a guide by your side or a coach, can be so powerful. And I think we're really lucky in the department because we have leaders in coaching like Smita Halder, who's been lighting the world with her coaching techniques, but she's also been a great trailblazer for others to go and seek that training as well. So I know Tim Karachi's finished his coaching certificate, and I know there's several others that have done that. And so we're really lucky to be in this immersive environment where there's other people that are using their growth mindset to bring some skill set back into academia that actually helps us all up our game. So aren't we so lucky to have all those people? And I think it's great. And so if you are doing some work in CBME, because I think many of us are immersed in that world, this is some of my own scientific work that I wanted to bring in, because I think that a lot of the time when we're actually going through the busy day, we just want to get those forms done. But I wanted to give you a quick piece of immediate, hopefully it's an action that you can change right now to improve the quality of your it's a small mnemonic that'll help you remember what you need to do to provide really good feedback when you're coaching someone or you're applying some of that coaching science. We boiled it down to 3 very easy things. Number 1, a quick description of what you observed. And in our rating scale, if we were going to rate you, you get between 0, which is no description, to 3 points. Then there's the how do you provide feedback about to improve? So do you actually provide some kind of feedback for someone to grow in a certain direction? And you can get 0 to 2 points. Again, no feedback is 0 and 2 points is great feedback. And most importantly, I think in when we're doing some of these note taking for the medical students or the residents, having those 2 things connected, right? The number of times I've read rich descriptions of great resuscitation, and then next time when you're charting, that's the kind of feedback that they get, and there's a bit of a divergence between the 2. And so I think that if you can say, great resuscitation, next time stand at the foot of the bed and make sure everyone knows that you're the person that's leading the resuscitation, that is something that is better. And then if you had a rich description of what this person did during the resuscitation and then gave them that feedback, that's even better, right? So the idea would be, I think, when we're reading these pieces of feedback later, they can't come in a left field. They can't emerge from nowhere. And I think having some kind of description about what's gone on will help you provide better feedback. And then linking those descriptions to the feedback, I think really just helps you up your game in terms of how you give feedback to someone in the world today. And so this is something that we've done some empirical work on. And so it's a little bit of evidence because we are at McMaster and I have to be evidence-based. So this is some of that evidence. Now, so I just snuck a little bit of faculty development in there, but I would like to ask everyone to find the chat now and think about, what's your next development plan? And if you're willing to share it, we'd love to hear it. Are some of you, going to a fancy course somewhere? Is someone just reading a new book? Are you doing some kind of like exploration on a topic that you have been wanting to for a while? Are you going to learn a new technique somewhere? Take a moment and if you can reflect on it, I think that'd be really great. And if you can't, then that's okay too, because you might be in the middle of other things and just listening, but maybe just take a moment and reflect. And if you're willing to share, I'd love for us to light up the chat with messages if you can.
And Teresa, while we're letting people get some time to type stuff in, maybe I could tell people a bit about what I'm doing, because I think
that'd be great. Yeah, what have you been up to lately?
So I think probably a lot of people know this, but the job of the chair has a lot of conflict management built into it, much more than I think most people understand. We have almost 900 faculty members between full and part-timers, and people do come into conflict. And I spend probably 70% of my energy mediating conflict, probably about 40% of my time. And so I decided that I needed some specific skills in that. And so, as you know, I went back, or I'm currently doing a Master's of Law degree at Osgood in mediation and dispute resolution. And you and I've talked about it, but I think the most interesting thing to me, there's many interesting things about this to me, but this is what I would consider to be extraordinarily well done adult education. And the really cool thing about extraordinarily well done adult education is that it's immediately applicable in people's practices. And I can cite many examples where we talked about a concept in one of the courses, and during the break, which occurred 10 minutes later, I applied those concepts in communications I was having with the people involved in the conflict. And it's been a real eye-opener for me. I would say the most important thing is if you decide to do these kind of things, is you got to seize them and do your very, very best. And I wouldn't recommend doing a master's degree at my age to most people, because it is an insane amount of work. But on the other hand, it's bringing insane value. And I would encourage everybody who's predisposed to do things like this to think about it, because it really does keeps your brain working. I think there's a danger that our brains stop working, and it has been very good to me that way. So that's been my experience. It's been remarkably interesting and remarkably valuable to me. And I would encourage others to think about that.
Yeah. And some of you, like Greg Kearney, who's just posted in the Q&A, he said that he's been working on a health YouTube video channel. I think that's great. And I think reaching our patients and our communities this way is a great way to do it. So thank you for that. And yeah, I'll take a look at it. And if there's any feedback, I'm sure lots of people can give you feedback on that. But yeah. So, and
then Teresa, maybe also worth mentioning Siobhan Deshauer's efforts.
Yeah.
So many of you will know Siobhan, who was a PGY5 in rheumatology up until July the 1st, and she's gone off to do other things right now. She was an extraordinarily successful YouTube star for sure, with 850,000 subscribers, which puts her kind of into the ethereal range of YouTube subscriptions. And she did very well done, extremely well done YouTube videos on being a doctor, being a resident, instructions or recommendations around vaccination, Really remarkable work products that she put together. Getting 250,000 people to watch her videos within a couple of weeks after they're released is a truly remarkable achievement. I don't know if you want to comment on that,
Yeah.
but that's the kind of thing that people in the Department of Medicine are doing.
Yeah, and it's great. And I think that, Siobhan, I've had lots of conversations with her on YouTube. She's violin MD. And she didn't do that overnight, right? That was something that she wanted to learn, and she accrued those skills over time. And just like anything else, she's turned it into an art craft that she does. And I think that oh yeah, there's another comment. Thank you, Anne, for sharing. How to best replace oneself and to do that legacy planning, to have profile for great people to actually excel within a portfolio that you've carved out. I do think that that's a really great goal, right? That's more of an organizational goal, but I think that actually having that succession planning, having that opportunity to do that is great. So thank you for sharing with that, because do think at different stages of our lives, at the end of a term or at the end of a career, it might be, you want to make space for other people. And so I think that's great to share that goal, and I love it. And so I think that when we think about how we do that, there's a framework by Keegan and Leahy that talks about having organizations become deliberately developmental. And so, they ask the question, like, how does your organization learn? How do you actually bring people together to think about how you can actually do that? And I do think that we're starting to experiment within CPD with a pilot project right now, headed by Dr. Sean Park. He's one of our assistant profs in the Division of Education and Innovation. We've been taking small groups through through activities that can help them actually learn together as a group to discover new things. He's helping us facilitate some of our own vision and mission building within the CPD office, but he's helping the folks at Merit with a strategic consultation right now. And he and I have helped with a project with Dr. Sonia Anand, where we looked at how we might actually change the way we do peripheral arterial disease management, and actually had patient engagement and things like that. So I do think that this is something to stay on the lookout for, that there are ways for us to actually bring that growth mindset into groups of people. And so if you're interested in that kind of stuff, please get in touch with me or Sean, and we can always chat about it. Our docket's pretty full right now for this term, but we're always planning for the future. So this is an example of an organizational growth mindset that we can, I think, bring to what we do. And then I think that sometimes some of us just need to actually get involved with some of these activities in our own time, in our own space. How many of you are super busy individuals who have maybe, I don't think most people have 8 children, but maybe 2. And sometimes it probably feels like 8, and depending on their age, they might be the age where you have to be the chauffeur in chief for them, and that's the most important role that you have right now, and you should be able to do that. However, it might be that you could squeeze some learning during the times that you're watching the 5-year-olds run after a soccer ball and not really know what they're doing. And we have developed a new platform. It's actually on a soft launch right now, it's called Quest. So query-based ubiquitous educator and scholars training, but Quest sounds more fun. And the idea is that you can go to the website fact.dev, and there's all these modules you can actually enroll within in order to start a quest towards learning. And so the idea would be that these are reflection prompts that you get in different topics. We have a great module by Jillian Roberge, and one of our educators in the clinician educator diploma, the program director, Catherine Tong. They work on one on Indigenous cultural safety, like some of those basic principles that many of us have been trying to learn, but they've aggregated all of that into kind of one module. For instance, Jillian is Dr. Roberge is a nationally recognized clinician educator for the Royal College in Indigenous Health. So she brings her expertise there and shares it with us. We also have stuff on leadership and management by our own Dr. Ruth Chen, who is in the School of Nursing, but she is doing some great stuff around curriculum design in there. There's also great work to be done around teaching and learning and technology. We'll be having some more of those coming out, and I think that it's going to be a great opportunity and ecosystem for you to check into one of these. at times what we'll be doing, and this is what I meant by coming soon, is that we're piloting right now a version of a quest club. So that's where you actually check into one of these quests, and just like a book club, you actually meet periodically to set goals and talk about the content, and then actually walk them through. So I imagine in the future we'll be able to have some quest clubs. Maybe I can talk Smita into doing one, or Tim into doing one on coaching, for instance. And the idea would be you'd all check into a quest, and then we get together periodically to talk about the activities within it and make sure we're all progressing in the same way. And so that is something that's coming down the chute. And I think that that'll be a great way for us to engage in learning together. And so if you want to check it out, you can go to literally type in your browser in the URL, where the URL is fac.dev, and it'll redirect you to this website where you can actually go and do some of these activities.
Teresa, we have a question. I'm just going to allow the person who's put their hand up to speak.
Sure.
So we'll have the mic in 1 second.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Go ahead, Abdullah. Unless you didn't mean to put your hand up.
He's muted, so perhaps he did not mean to put his hand up.
That's okay. Well, if you want to type it, Abdullah, if you're having tech difficulties, we will entertain the question. I'll just read it out for you. So I'll wait for that, and we'll move on for now. But happy to entertain the question at any point. And so the third trend I wanted to put together is kind of in line with what I just talked about, but that social networks and connection are so important in today's world. So social connection and networks will be how, with the expectation of how we interface with the world as health professionals. And I do think that as physicians, it's become very apparent during the pandemic, if it wasn't before, that being connected with the world and being part of how we're morphing society and informing our public directly has been a need that has emerged during the pandemic. I think that COVID has shown us the old models of information, the way that maybe some of us are trained to think about how we interact with our patients. They're probably out the window in many ways. I think Twitter, Facebook, and even TikTok have entered into prime time as undeniable facets of our daily lives. I think we have to consider how we can leverage these networks for education and learning for ourselves. I think we have to think about how we can create networks and communities of practice. And I think that it's a way for us to become socially responsible and engaged. I think in many ways, in medicine, we're even more hierarchical than some military organizations. And so I do think that we have to think about what that traditional hierarchy means and how it usually trickles down to information that's handed down from on high. But I think that going forward, a lot of the time, our learning is probably going to be less direct, like fan out phone sort of network, but rather a network that is non-linear, non-hierarchical, and pretty open. I think that open digital technologies have created that opportunity. So whether it's Twitter or even Google, all of these websites, they're all connected to each other in different ways, right? And the idea is that I think we need to leverage that for our advantage. Some people talk about rhizomatic learning. That's like the root systems of root vegetables and stuff like that is where that comes from. But the idea is that and anyone that's ever done this looked up something on Wiki and found themselves 3 hours later still reading Wikipedia. That is rhizomatic learning at its best. But I do think we do that with people too. So Wiki is a social platform, obviously, where people can input things. But I think that many of us have probably read a tweet and then clicked on the link and read about that paper, or engaged in some kind of dialogue somewhere else, gone through a YouTube channel, looked at the comments, found another link. Those are the network learning opportunities that I think that we need to think about how we cash in on those as health professionals and physicians. I think that in terms of the local learning environments, I think, when you have your learners there, I think that you can actually engage with them in that network learning as well. So rather than let's say, rather than assuming the person in the corner holding their phone and actually avidly texting away is actually just, having a conversation with their friends, I think it's worthwhile thinking about whether or not they're looking something up and having a frustrating time to do it. And one of the techniques that I've had is that I actually have engaged people in developing that educational alliance and flagging that sometimes I'm doing teaching. I'll ask everyone to pull out their phone and actually have them use their phones to pay attention and actually help me figure something out, right? So I call it a speed round, where you actually all look up the same thing, and then we talk about the route that you actually got that, and we can give them that timely feedback about whether or not they were looking things up properly. And I think that this allows us to show that we're role modeling not just feedback seeking and like process orientation, but also that idea that I don't know everything and I need to look it up as well. And I think that this allows to create some of that psychological safety, but I think it also validates that there's a wide breadth, sorry, of information out there, and we have to learn how to curate that well, and we have to do that real time query, but we also have to do that real-time critical appraisal. And having 5 different people bring up different either papers or podcasts or like blog posts allows us to have that conversation of what's the best way to find that information. And when I end up using MD Calc, I do explain to them, for instance, that I've looked up the papers, I've read them, I believe them, I align with them, and so I use that tool in MD Calc, and I don't use the other calculators that I've never looked up before, because I vet the information before. And I think that that's how we can bring some of that digital learning into our spaces, but also keep our allegiance to critical appraisal and all of those things that we've been taught to really incorporate into our practice as clinicians here at McMaster, right? I think that we can also be connected better by a group of people. So, we have a bunch of emergency medicine educators that we've connected during COVID, and now we're just continuing that conversation. I think that you can connect globally with different individuals. I think WhatsApp is one of the more used networks in some countries that have more of a mobile first. And sometimes other things are blocked, right? So WhatsApp it tends to be pretty accessible still. And I even know that there's a really great network of medical educators in Africa that actually, I think they have like tens of thousands of people in that WhatsApp group, which means that, you probably have to mute that one, but people get a lot of their information from there, so that they can keep up their game in terms of sharing resources. One of the ways that we've done that with a closed network is this is the faculty incubator program that I said I used to get paid for and no longer do. And we actually have published papers on this, so if you want to read about it. But the idea would be that this is an international incubator that runs once a year for about 10 months continuously. And we basically run an online journal club. We have an online discussion group, and we go through thematically. Each month is a different topic. And so right now they're talking about intergenerational differences in the setting of tech, teaching with tech. And so, there are preceptors that put questions up, and then a conversation goes on. And that's the idea, is that I think we can capitalize on some of these closed networks to actually engage in learning rather than just passively experiencing them. I think Twitter is another one of those, and we've seen lots of social movements and advocacy happen in that, because it's more of an open network as opposed to a closed network that I just described to you. And I think that we've seen a lot of these things come up into our lives, right? The Women in Medicine hashtag, the Me Too hashtag, these have changed the way that we view some of the inequities that we see every day. The free open access medical education, the FOMED hashtag, allows you to find free open access medical education from other medical educators to see what they've been teaching about. The nephrologists even have something called NephJC and Neph Madness, which I think is a stroke of genius. But Neph Madness is a hashtag that really only comes up in March, because it's during the time of March Madness, and they have a massive nephrology journal club playoff series where they have a blue ribbon panel that they actually have already picked the best paper, and they have divisions like pediatric nephrology, toxicology, and nephrology, and in each of those divisions, like, they pick the best done paper, and they have playoffs until they have one paper that's the best paper of the year, which I think is really amazing and hilarious. And they've been running that for a number of years, and it's wonderful. Even if you're not a nephrologist, I think you can appreciate the zeal for which they bring to it, and they always have a write up about every paper, and it's quite amazing. And if you wanted to connect with MacPFD, there's the website, there's the Twitter, YouTube, SoundCloud, digital events. We're trying to hit them all. If you're interested in more continuing health sciences education, they also have a website, Twitter, LinkedIn. They don't have a YouTube or a SoundCloud, but definitely you can connect with them and come and learn with us in real time as well. And I think that another thing that we can do is also bring people together to, rather than just broadcast with blog posts and podcasts, there's ways that we can actually bring people together in online discussion forums. So just like the faculty incubator I talked about, we also did these academic life and emergency medicine case series. The case series doesn't run anymore, but when we were running it back in 2014, what we did was we posted a difficult case of an educational dilemma. And then what we did was we had some experts write responses to those cases, kind of like Harvard Business Review does. Then we posted the case to the website, and then the community discussed it. And then we put together a package debrief. And so now on the website, if you go to alium.com/medic, you can actually see that we actually have all of these cases all wrapped up. And you can read the original post, but you can actually download the PDF. And those are really useful local faculty development modules, or you can just read them on your own. But if you're looking to for a lesson plan for something that you want to do with your group, for instance, you can actually download these, and they're useful because they have the case and you can discuss them, and then there's take-home notes for people to have after they go home. We've also repurposed it into iTunes, free books on iTunes, and they're also posted on ResearchGate. So you can definitely check it out. I think that, this is the kick of the can at doing some of that network learning earlier on in my career, but definitely excited to share it with you. And I think that they can still be useful, especially for some of the more junior people who might be really keen on getting involved with education early. It's a great way to do a set of rounds or have a great discussion around a learning topic or learning environment topic. And we even published a paper about it in academic medicine, so you can kind of understand the behind the scenes if you wanted to replicate it. We also have these education theory made practical books that have been published as well. So you can take a look at those if you're interested in that kind of faculty development. But we really try to embrace that open access movement locally when we pivoted to the digital landscape for faculty development. And I think that that is something that hopefully cuts down the ability for people to, or the barrier for people to join and enjoy the materials. All right. Number 4 trend is that I think entrepreneurial and intrapreneurial efforts need to be present in academia to foster innovation and sustainability. I think health tech is here to stay, and I think that we're going to need to have new people that know about this stuff, because Apple, Google, Amazon, Epic, they're all kind of bringing some of this stuff in. So whether it's AI, robots, data analytics, nanotechnologies, these are going to be coming down the chute. And I don't think that, honestly, as cute as this robot is, I don't think it'll replace us. But I do think that there'll be some assisted things that can happen, hopefully, that will make our lives easier. And I think over time we'll have that. In terms of the cloud computing, I think there's lots of opportunities for people to get engaged in that. And then I think that in terms of innovation, I think that we can support that by being entrepreneurial ourselves, or to help others be entrepreneurial through some of the programming that was going on. And I just want to highlight that there's big movements towards actually bringing us together, closer together to the business school and also the engineering school to actually help with that health and innovation. And finally, I think that agility and change will be the differentiator for medical education institutions. And so I hope we can be leading that. And I think the only constant in life is change in many ways, because I think that we're always tinkering at home with improvement. But I think that in healthcare, we're also doing this. So my challenge is, can we do this in education and not just fall privy of these cycles of improvement only when accreditation rolls around every couple of years? Can we be skating ahead? Can we be making the changes as we go every year a little bit so that we can be better every day? And so I think that we have to close that gap of that knowledge creation to knowledge in action. And I think that what we can do is actually, and people have been enrolling in the McMaster Clinician Educator Diploma for a while. For instance, now I just finished my term as program director, so less conflict of interest now, but I'm still on the teaching committee for this. And I do think that there's a lot of changes that we've been able to have because we have trainees in 3 campuses. We've had 40, almost 50 active trainees going through. 50 trainees go through, but 40 of them are still active doing projects, dozens of different things that they're working on. They're constantly improving medical education. And I think that this is one kick of the can, bringing that kind of like growth mindset to the organization. And I do think that we need to think about how we can do that. So I think these are the 5 trends that I'd like to kind of point out. A lot of them are faculty development, but I think that they do speak to the need for us to change the way we're doing things. And I think that we can get involved with all of these things in different ways. So hopefully one of these future trends is something that you find resonates with you. And so hopefully you can set that as a goal that you can explore. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. Excellent. There's the question and answer is open and the chat is open if anyone wants to ask questions. Greg did post his YouTube channel if anybody wants to go there and have a look at his work product. And I'm sure that others are doing the same kind of thing. I wonder, Teresa, if you could just give us a really quick summary of the communities of practice to lead into the next set of rounds, which are in a month, about that, but also to talk about how it fits with what you're talking about right now.
Yeah, so I think that one of the kick of the can that we've done in the that's been a great initiative that I've been helping out with is something called the Communities of Practice Project. And not to be too contrite, but I think that what happens is that sometimes we're all functioning in our silos, right? With our divisions, we hang out with people that have the similar clinical practice than us. But sometimes, what brings you joy and what you're truly aligned with academically isn't the same as everyone else, because in your division you might be the only person who's super nerdy about education or QI or innovation work. And so the idea would be that we wanted to create these threads across the divisions that could actually connect people to be able to bring them together. So for instance, there's people super interested in QI, so there's a QI community of practice, and just in case, to give them a shout out, they have their QI symposium coming up in a couple of weeks on a Thursday. So if this is something that you're interested in, you can see what they're doing for their conference, but also join the community and then help with organizing next year's conference, for instance, but also learning about the craft of QI along the way, doing some of their engagement activities. So definitely that's an example of one. Some of the other things that we have out there would be there's an education innovation community of practice. There is a leadership community of practice. There is a innovation
improvement sciences.
And clinical improvement sciences. Yep, I just can't remember the innovation one. I'm held up on what it's called. I think it's called. It starts with an X. It's something very innovation like, but they're looking at entrepreneurship and innovation. And so each of these are, I wouldn't call them like clubs, but they're definitely communities of people who are like-minded. They're sharing a craft, as is the term community of practice, and it's interdivisional. So I think it's a great way. We've actually opened up some of these to the rest of Faculty of Health Sciences, and so you might have nurses or occupational therapists or physiotherapists in your group as well. And I think it's a great way for us to really engage with people that are very much like us in our academic mission, but might not actually be in the same specialty, which creates great synergy for some of the things that you might want to go and do.
Excellent. So thanks, Teresa. No questions in the chat or in the question and answer. So I just like to take a second to thank you not only for this set of rounds, which was really very good and introduced people to a lot of concepts which we've been putting a lot of energy to in the department, but also just to thank you for all the energy you put into keeping us all up to date on what's going on in this world, which is completely foreign to many of us. It's appreciated. And I think also pushing really hard on faculty development in the electronic world. It is really, once you get into it, it is super convenient, a lot easier than the way that we used to do faculty development. So thanks very much. These rounds will be recorded. They'll be on our YouTube channel, hopefully within the next couple of days, if anybody wants to refer back to them. And of course, Teresa is extraordinarily accessible. So if you have questions, please feel free to send them along to her. And otherwise, we'll return back to Dr. Verhofstadt and Dr. Azam's rounds for next Thursday. And next medicine chairs grand rounds will be in a month from now. And they will actually focus on the communities of practice, just so we all learn a bit more about them. So thanks very much. And thanks, Teresa, very much.
Okay, thank you.